So we should just
Thank you
stay
very
on the
much,
line,
everybody.
right, Jeanette?
Yeah.
Jeanette?
You could stay on the line, or
Additionally, an invitation was extended to council members to meet with our board, and Council Member Wyatt will be meeting with us today, and he's on the agenda. We welcome him to our meeting. We will hold a public comment session at the end of the meeting limited to matters discussed today. Before we begin, I request George to take roll call of the directors, please.
Chairman.
Here.
Chairman Olson. Vice
Here.
Chairman Jurzak. Vice Chairman Jurzak.
I think she's muted.
She's muted?
Yeah.
Okay. Answer the press. Jeanette, if you're there, press *6.
*6. Oh.
Yes,
Right.
you're present. Thank you. Then Secretary Arthur is present. Director Floss.
Present.
County Executive Poloncarz.
Present.
Mayor Brown.
Present.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. So we'll begin our meeting. Our first item of business is to approve the minutes from BFSA's May 20th, 2020 board meeting. Directors will find a draft of those minutes and the accompanying resolution in your board book under tab 2. May I have such a motion?
So
moved.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any corrections, deletions, additions? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that passes. For our next item of business, I would like to welcome Council Member Wyatt to our meeting. An invitation has been extended by the BFSA to Common Council to meet with our board, and I'm very happy to welcome Council Member Wyatt today. You have the floor, Council.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Olson. I really appreciate the opportunity, and to the board members and the Executive Director, Ms. Roll, thank you for this opportunity. As you all know, COVID has ravaged our city budget and has put us in a very difficult situation. However, I don't think that it was only COVID that has put us in that situation. I think part of it has been a lot to do with sometimes poor planning and not really effectively looking at some of the real issues. One of the issues that I've been concerned with over the last couple of years is the lack of revenue. We've been booking budgets of about $400+ million. However, over the last 3 years, we've only returned or received $475 million on average. So we continue to book budgets and book revenues that are not really planned and looked at in the best way fiscally. As a finance person, many times when you look at finances, you look at a trend. And it seems as though sometimes when we look at those things, we don't look at those trends. Our revenues have not been clearly stated. There's been a lot of consternation over the last couple of years with the council members as we've approved budgets. And as you all may be aware, myself and Councilmember Bowman, who's on the line, did not support this year's budget because of the uncertainties. So I'm very, very thankful because of the uncharted waters and some of the difficulties, I am really hopeful that we can work more closely with this honorable body so that we can make very sound decisions. Unfortunately, we have not had the best communications with the administration. You all got a revised plan that we never even got. And so it's things like that that's very challenging for us. And again, working with your honorable body and in the controller's office, which has been great in getting us information. We know that this is an unsettling time. As you may be aware, we received a notice from the governor's office that our AIM money is going to be cut by 20%, something that we were concerned about, but we always got this information that they were confident we're going to get this. We're confident we're going to get the federal money. We're confident we're going to get the money from the Senecas. And every time we're told that confidently, we always doubt because it hasn't happened as of yet. So I'm dealing with the issue of the reality of where we are. We need good information because we are in a very uncharted waters. And so for me, I know that the previous chairman of finance may not have had the best opinion of the BFSA, but I'm of the opinion that I believe that from the meetings that I've seen and watched, you have the best information. So we want to utilize your expertise for us to make sound decisions. We want the administration to be included as well. But thus far, we have not gotten very good information from them. But I'm hopeful that going forward, because of the situation that gets more and more dire, that we can coalesce around one another, around one city, to make sure, again, that our decisions are very sound and we do the best to protect the services for the residents of the city of Buffalo. I don't have time for politics. Again, I've not been a politician all my life, only about 6 years. Most of my background is in finance, so I deal with the reality of what's coming before me, what I can see, what I can kind of estimate, and what's real and not what's fake. We've been hearing over and over again that we're going to get this $65 million from the federal government, and we've been told, we've heard from the president, we heard from Mitch McConnell that was not going to happen. So for me and for some of my colleagues, we thought that our best approach would be to make some concessions and make some other plans, and not just one plan. We need to have several plans because there's another issue that the COVID may come back in the fall or in the winter. So we just can't go with one game plan. I believe we have to have several game plans to really minimize the situation. We were not ready for COVID, unfortunately, but I hope that we can learn from this lesson to prepare ourselves better for the fall because we know that right now the water is very choppy. We do not want to sink. We want to try to survive. And again, your honorable body could be hugely helpful, and I'm really looking forward to working more closely with you as we navigate through this tumultuous time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely, thank you. I think to a person, the authority is in agreement with you that it's extremely important for us to be working with not only the administration but also the council and comptroller to work our way through this in the best possible way while maintaining essential services for the residents of Buffalo. So we really appreciate your coming and willingness to work with us.
Mr. Chairman?
Any questions or comments for the council person?
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, George.
Can I ask him, did in his deliberations, in the council's deliberations, what recommendations did the council staff make to them for changes, or did they make any? What were the recommendations that came from staff?
Okay, we didn't officially make any recommendations, so unfortunately we're tied up in an issue regarding obtaining a attorney for the Common Council. But what we would like to see, some of us would have liked to see some cuts on the table, some realistic cuts.
What I'm asking, council member, did your staff review the budget recommendations coming from the mayor?
Well, yes, we reviewed the budget, yes.
Yeah, the council staff, and did the council staff make any recommendations such as, did you talk about any property tax increase or any? The reason I ask that is that because the council, can raise revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And did you all consider raising any revenues this year?
No, that wasn't a conversation. We basically went by what the mayor was proposing about keeping revenue static, and again, part of that was understood because of the financial impact that it was on residents who may have been unemployed. So we kind of understood that. However, the other options weren't presented to us that we could raise revenue because, again, in our minds, because of the high unemployment rates, we didn't want to see people in foreclosure and those type of things. So that was not something that we really deliberated at great length. Well,
I would say a couple things. That only the council can. In situations like that, you also are faced with major layoffs, a lot of layoffs. You know, that would also cripple the city. So, and the city hasn't raised any taxes at all in the last couple of years or so. So that's one of the things. The other question I have is, you're saying that there's no communications between the council and the mayor's office or his office of administration and budget? You're not communicating with them?
Right. Well, as far as the proposal, when you all requested a revision, we did not see that. We were unaware of it until I went to your website and saw that it was submitted. None of those things were discussed with us. Now, as far as the leadership, I don't know if they were aware of that. My comments with the council president, it was never brought to me that there was a proposal. I mean, I believe the one proposal was to borrow $52 million for fiscal 2021, as well as $16 million in layoffs. That was not brought to us. We had no conversation about it, and it was, you know, again, something that I got off your website when I looked at the agenda.
Okay. You said one other thing that piqued my curiosity and my go back. You say that you're negotiating for an attorney?
Well, one of the things that we were looking at was adding an attorney that will report to the Common Council. That was an issue that was budgeted for, I believe, $94,000. Because it became such a political football, we backed off on it. And then the other issue was because of our financial situation.
The reason I bring that up, because I've gone through that also, and we have been told that there is an attorney from the Corporation Counsel's office who was assigned to the. As a matter of fact, there were two attorneys from the Corporation Counsel's office that were assigned to the Common Council, and that they worked for the council, and so I'm asking, you don't have any attorneys that are assigned to you on a full-time basis from the Corporation Counsel's office?
We do. However, Council President, when we so there's other issues that happen that come about, as you well know, through the council, that we would like an independent council to make decisions and assist us in making decisions. However, you know, because that line right now, Corporation Council, we approve the Corporation Council, but it's the mayor's Corporation Council. It's his person. So we had some challenges with that. However, we did come to an agreement that through council staff and attrition, if someone were to leave, we would hire a Corporation Counsel or an attorney to advise us through that process.
Okay, let me just tell you the way it's worked in the past, and you just for your thinking about that. When there was a dispute between us, the members of the council, and the mayor's office or the controller's office, the Corporation Counsel, who was supposed to represent everyone, would recluse himself and would permit the mayor's office and the council or whoever it is to go out and hire independent attorneys.
Okay.
And that they would pay the bill. The Corporation Counsel would negotiate the fee of the attorneys. And then they would have separate attorneys so that the Corporation Counsel was not put into the position of having to say that he represents the mayor over the council, because his duties, his duties and responsibilities, at least when I was there, was to all the elected officials, and so when there was a dispute, he had to recluse himself, and because a couple of times there that the council and the controller's office and got together and they sued the mayor, and we all had separate attorneys and so forth and so on, corporation. So I'm saying that that's the way it has been. It doesn't seem to me that, you have to go through all that. The Corporation Counsel should be able to recluse himself. But let me say this, that also that you or somebody from your staff, you have a staff, somebody from your staff should be assigned to go to or come to or to monitor every meeting of the control board of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. One of your people should be assigned there, and so that you see the agenda Our staff can send the information to you. You can see the agenda, what's on the agenda, what isn't on the agenda, and you would be up to date on what we're doing. And that has not happened in all the time that I've been there, but it should be there. That person should be assigned and know what's going on, and that's all I have to say right now.
Yeah. And Mr. Arthur, thank you for that information, and we will definitely use that because that was not something that we had discussed. But in addition, our corporate council staff has been on the call. Myself and Brian Bowman have been listening in on your meetings more regularly, and we do have someone that will be assigned going forward. And we're hopeful that also that we could have someone from BFSA come to our finance committee meeting so that, the members can have, we can have an open dialogue about some of the concerns that we have, especially if we're going to have to be doing more borrowing. That's something that's very disconcerting to us because many of us have projects in our districts that we've promised our residents. And if we have to do more borrowing, that means that's going to limit the capital dollars that we're going to be able to have for our districts, which is something that we're concerned about.
This is Nils Olson. I would only echo George's comments, particularly on the importance of all three engaged institutions working together, the administration, the controller, and the council. And we are here, I think we've always interpreted our role as trying to provide the best information and assistance that we can to the decision makers. We're obviously an unelected body. We don't make policy, but we try very hard to work with you and make recommendations, answer any questions that you may have. So it's encouraging to have your participation, and you or anyone else in the council certainly welcome to come and appear at our meetings at any time. We really welcome it and appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Absolutely. I would agree with George, too, that having experienced the problems of having SUNY counsel representing an institution or an individual within the institution, it's always important to have your own lawyer.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And the disputes come up, and that's why the Corporation Counsel's Office, who's there to represent all of the elected officials, and even as far as the board separate themselves, and they go and they have their own attorney.
Yeah. No, that's right. Because obviously, if there's a dispute, they can't sit in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And fortunately for us, we have had good representation. Mr. Ball has done a fantastic job for us, and our corporation counsel, who's been assigned to us, a young lady who's done another fantastic job. But it comes those times when we can request that we're concerned about. One of them coming up right now is as we deliberate through police reform, and we're discussing about a citizens review body. There's some reluctance, and so we want to make certain that the advice that we're getting puts us in the best situation to do something like that. But however, if the mayor doesn't agree with it, we don't want our council to discourage us and not give us the proper information. I can't say I don't have any instances where that's happened. I don't want to put it out there, but we just felt that for us, the best situation for us to have our council that advises on those type of situations.
Well, coming from the law school, UB, I can certainly I agree with your assessment of the quality of corporation counsel. I think, in my experience, very professional, very knowledgeable, and very helpful.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, any other questions for the councilman? Okay, hearing none, our next item is to review the proposed deficit note to be issued on behalf of the City of Buffalo prior to the end of the current fiscal year of June 30th. Items related to this matter have been provided to you under tab 3 and include a copy of the submission from the City Controller to the Council, in addition to various communications between the BFSA, Executive Director, and the City Controller regarding the financial comparison of a BFSA issue to a City of Buffalo issue. Jeanette will discuss this item with us.
Good afternoon, and thank you for your time this afternoon. The city is proposing to issue a deficit note in the current fiscal year to fund revenue deficiencies due to the COVID pandemic. On April 30th, the city administration released its third quarter GAAP report and projected a deficit for the year ending June 30th, 2020 of $15 million. The city controller is proposing a deficit finance in the amount of $18 million. The city intends to close this transaction prior to June 30th. There is a draft term sheet that was provided to you in your board books, and I will review the key considerations with you. It's a pretty straightforward transaction. It's a direct placement with J.P. Morgan Chase. It's being sold as an 18-month note. There is an option to the city to extend it for an additional 6 months to June 2022, but this option has not been built into the proposed terms of the agreement. The cost of issuance, which consist of financial advisor and bond counsel, fees are estimated at $21,700 and would be paid for by proceeds of the financing. The interest rate subject or pursuant to a commitment letter from J.P. Morgan Chase is 1.22%. This rate, it is greater than the rate that was predicted by our financial advisor for the City of Buffalo based on current ratings, which was 1.04% from the pricing desk from our financial advisor. Based on this pricing difference, a letter was sent to the City Controller recommending that there be a consideration to contact other financial institutions to potentially obtain a more favorable interest rate for the City of Buffalo. We did receive a response from the City Controller noting that it would be logistically challenging to contact other financial institutions due to the need to close the transaction by June 30th. These communications are included in your board book under tab 3. Our financial advisor further estimated that there would be a 15 basis points advantage for a BFSA direct placement compared to a City of Buffalo direct placement, and furthermore estimated or predicted an interest rate for BFSA of 0.89%. This translates into a cost advantage ranging between $40,000 if you're looking at just the 15 basis point spread, or if you're looking at the spread between a estimated 0.89% interest rate for BFSA versus the 1.22% as committed by J.P. Morgan to the city of 1.22%. The amount goes up to $88,000 for a cost difference. Very quick summary on the deficit note. Like I mentioned, it's a very straightforward type of transaction. And if there are any questions on that, we can certainly take those questions now.
Any questions for Jeanette? Discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on.
Well, I just have one.
Sure, Fred. Go ahead.
Yeah, given our analysis, do we believe that they'll have enough liquidity through the entire period, or should they have? I understand that people don't ever want to borrow more than they have to. Would it have been appropriate to actually do more deficit financing at this point?
They are. The city, being the city, they're limited to $25 million. That's the limit under current local finance law. It's interesting that you mentioned that. Councilmember Wyatt mentioned it during the call earlier today, and there's been some information trickling in during this meeting, actually, that state aid for June appears to have been reduced by 20%. So I don't know at this point if that means that, they were looking at an $18 million deficit financing. Could that potentially increase? It could. It could change between now and the end of the year. Is my
I just think that we need to make sure that we're careful that while I understand that we never want to borrow more than we have to, that in some cases over time that can actually be more costly over the long run if we don't have the appropriate cash flow. So I would just hope that we would consider to strictly monitor the cash flow to ensure that the city and the district have enough funds to be able to meet their obligations.
This is Ben Swanekamp. With regards to state revenue, from the county perspective, we have been seeing a massive slowdown in nearly all kinds of state reimbursement payments. Our sort of quiet understanding from the state budget office is there's going to be no clarification on how the state is going to handle its aid cuts until after federal action occurs, if it does. So it'll be at least another month before that picture is clear. We've also seen that grants, like many grants that have been renewed for many years typically, are being held up, including many that expire on July 1st. So the state revenue picture is occurring as we speak, and we're hoping to have more guidance from the state mid-summer, but they're clearly waiting on federal action before they actually implement their cuts.
Hi, and this is Donna. We were just notified that we are going to have some of our state aid, and they use the term withheld until further time. So we have asked the Comptroller's Office to perhaps increase the amount of the deficit note to the max of the $25 million. And that is Director Floss mentioned to help with the cash flow.
Yeah, that seems very prudent.
Thank you, and I would say that I think that that's the appropriate measure at this point, given the uncertainty. So thank you, Don.
Yes, everything is totally in flux. I don't envy the county or the city trying to deal on a daily basis with major changes in the budget. Makes things very difficult. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Donna. We'll move on to the Buffalo City School District review of final adopted budget. The Buffalo City School District adopted a 2020-21 budget on May 27th, 2020. There were changes to the final budget as compared to the preliminary budget as we reviewed in May, which we will discuss today. A report on this matter has been provided under tab 4. Nathan will discuss these items with us. Nathan, could you begin, please? Is Nathan muted?
Nathan, you may be muted. You have to hit *6. Thank you.
Do we have Nathan?
Can you hear me?
I'll walk down. Oh, now we can hear you, yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay. Apologies for that.
No problem.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. The following is a summary of the Buffalo City School District's recommended budget to adopted budget changes. Everyone has a copy of the slide presentation, so just to help follow the material, I'll indicate which slide I am to begin the conversation. For starters, slide number 2. The school district's budget was adopted on May 27th. The fiscal year 2021-24 financial plan has not been formally approved. The adopted budget does include a $50 million deficit, which was closed to the appropriation of fund balance. Each year of the financial plan contains significant deficits with a 4-year cumulative deficit of $219.9 million. Now, the previous document that we reviewed was the recommended budget. This document had included $12.5 million in, quote, other necessary cuts in planning. What the adopted budget does is it defines and then codifies these within the adopted budget. These include facility closures, program consolidations, program reductions, transportation savings, and reductions in discretionary spending. And I'll review each one of these in a little bit more detail. A full summary of this was provided within the report. Slide number 3. General fund revenues total $904.7 million in the adopted budget. In this slide, the recommended and the adopted are identical to one another. The adopted budget shows the most current, up-to-date estimates for general fund revenues. Slide number 4. New York State's finances have been deeply impacted by both the pandemic and the ensuing recession. The state enacted budget included a pandemic adjustment, which was an overall adjustment to all school districts. The Buffalo City School District's reduction was quantified at $29.6 million, and then it was backfilled by a commensurate amount through the Federal CARES Act of $29.6 million. Slide number 5. The level of school state aid may be reduced further from what has already been provided within the New York State enacted budget. The State Director of Budget is authorized to determine whether or not the enacted budget is balanced during 3 measurement periods. If the general fund imbalance has occurred during the measurement period, the Director of the Budget is empowered to, quote, adjust or reduce any general fund and or New York State Special Revenue Fund appropriation and related cash disbursement by any amount needed to maintain a balanced budget. For the Buffalo City School District, the across-the-board 20% cut in aid would be quantified at $110 million, and this was a number that the district had previously estimated and provided. That's noted as a threat, but is not, obviously is not included within the adopted budget. It's noted as a threat that could occur with that cut. Now, slide number 6. Total general fund expenditures in the adopted budget are consistent with the recommended budget. However, there were some modifications within the various categories, and this is depicted on the slide above. All the changes overall are shown there. Employee compensation was increased by $1.8 million. Benefits were increased by $500,000. And then there were reductions as well in transportation and then the miscellaneous all other expenditures. But the net impact was 0. All of the adjustments from the recommended budget to the adopted budget reflect the final school-based budgets, as well as the $12.5 million in all necessary cuts in planning. Slide number 7. This slide depicts the total employee compensation and budgeted level of full-time equivalent positions. The adopted budget included $1.8 million in additional employee compensation as compared to the recommended budget. It includes a net reduction of 49 full-time equivalent employees. Now, with the employee compensation increasing and number of positions decreasing, it was the first question we had was whether it was overstated or not. Moving on to slide number 8, the analysis did determine that the individual employee compensation lines were somewhat overstated given the employee compensation that they currently receive as well as the contractual terms. The district increased the average salaries in the final iteration of the budget just to be conservative. If actual employee compensation expenditures are less than budget, budgetary transfers will occur throughout the school year to other areas of need. In one area is that the superintendent intends to reallocate unspent funds to other schools to ensure equitable funding throughout the district. Slide number 9, this is a table that was provided within the report. This breaks down the various $12.5 million in other reductions. Specialty school programs closed with pupils, employees transferred to similar schools. I wanted to note that there was some misunderstanding on that when it was first announced that it said school closures. These are not full school buildings, but rather specialty schools that will either sunset or be phased out earlier, and these students are transferred into very similar programs. So it's not a full school building being shut down, but rather just a redistribution of resources. There were changes within special education of $1.6 million, a central office hiring freeze for an additional $1 million, various program operational changes for a total of $4.4 million, some facility closures, which are full buildings with small programs located within the facilities. Those programs transferred to other buildings to better utilize the real estate portfolio that they have, and then savings of $0.4 million associated with that. And then other reductions, which includes curtailing overtime, utility costs, travel, and meeting expenses within the central office for $2.1 million. Okay, so for slide number 10, we have our conclusions following the review and analysis of the adopted budget. The adopted budget is now final and is not anticipated to be modified until the July 1st recognition of carry forward encumbrances. To mention, the 21-24 financial plan was reviewed, but has not been adjusted to reflect the changes from the recommended to the adopted budget. The adopted budget does include some new expenditures that the district will need to incur to reopen the schools. The strategies are going forward, but they're currently in the developmental phase. Buffalo City School District, like every other school district across the state, is waiting for specific guidance from New York State Education Department. This is anticipated in early to mid-July. So the actual plan to reopen the schools will impact the adopted budget once the unknown knowns are known. The final page, slide number 11, the 2021 general fund revenues have not been adjusted and reflect the most up-to-date projections. The general fund expenditure categories have been adjusted, but in total, the budget was unchanged. The 2021 budget staffing has decreased by a net of 49 full-time equivalent positions to 4,852. General fund employee compensation and benefits were largely increased despite the reduction of the positions. And we discussed that was to provide for budgetary changes throughout the year as needed. The final conclusion is that the budget's adopted, but the 2021-24 financial plan was not formally adopted, and it would be staff's recommendation that to formally adopt that document as well. And that concludes my brief overview of the changes between the adopted budget.
Okay, we'll open it up for questions. I have a couple to start. Is the decrease in busing costs driven by online learning and the need then to bus fewer students?
Yes, there is a program that is now anticipated to be virtual rather than physical on-site. So there's some bus transportation savings from that.
Does it also reflect the fact that when they reopen, they're going to probably have to maintain social distancing on the buses, which means fewer students on each bus? It probably means more buses.
That seems very, very likely. That's not included within the savings in the adopted budget. That would be something that would be in the developmental plan. There may very well be additional transportation needs just to be able to provide for the social distancing, right. But that hasn't been quantified yet within the plan.
Yeah, I would assume that there's, while they've identified funds for reopening, that some of the costs could be quite extreme, particularly if classrooms, the number of students in a classroom is reduced. That would seem to result in more classes being taught, and if so, then that's obviously also an additional fairly significant expense. The special education decreases, is that the result of an anticipated decrease in the number of students receiving special education services?
It is not.
It reduced the number of self-contained classrooms and special education chairs. I assume they couldn't do that unless the number of students is reduced.
There's a few things that are going on there. The district provided some additional material on that. One of the changes of service was that the high school SAA classes are moving from the 611 to the 811 model, except for the behavioral focus classes.
Okay.
There's a lot going on with that, but one of the items would be to consolidate classes from 12 to 10 and reduce with a reduction of 2 teachers by doing that.
Right.
And the savings associated with that were the 2 full-time equivalent teachers. There's quite a bit more, but that's essentially what's going on is consolidating classes.
Hi, this is Fred. Can I just jump in on
sure,
this
go ahead,
special
Fred.
ed? Is there any other monies for restarting special ed, given all of the difficulties that these students are going to have coming back into school after such a long layoff? I'm assuming that there'd be large transitional costs and actually the need for additional probably teachers just to take care of that transition period. Is any of that there?
This budget is based on the traditional model of reopening. They've indicated that this is certainly something that will need to be developed, but as it stands right now, nothing has been identified specifically for that, other than the need to adjust the budget as needed once guidance is received.
Yeah, I would certainly echo Fred's concerns. It seems like this is a group of students that's probably been most dramatically affected by the loss of face-to-face teaching and the move to some sort of distance learning. I can't imagine doing special education services online very effectively. So I would assume that it's going to create a greater need, particularly for that group of self-contained students. Also, it's unfortunate.
Do we know if there are any?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any model for catching students back up to get them to grade level? And what were the costs of those as we start to, both for special ed and I guess for the obviously other school district students?
Director Floss, I can indicate that one of the items, the program changes, is the extended learning program. This is the program that will operate in a virtual environment, and then which operates with because they're not busing the students there. There's transportation associated with that. But I think what you're referring to is overall the potential that much more learning will happen virtually to get to not just for the summer learning loss, but also from the early shutdown. At this point, the adopted budget really reflects a traditional model of reopening. And those are very real needs that they'll need to address, but they're not quantified within this May 5th or May 27th approved document yet. I can defer to the district for their tentative plans.
Yeah, does anybody then from the school district know what are essentially if we have, let's say, sophomores and they end up being a year behind when they become seniors, how are they going to end up being able to be prepared to go on to college or go on to job placement and other things? And are we looking at additional summer instruction? With the obvious costs tied to those?
is that just something that we're hoping the federal government will come through with money, or do we have any plans whatsoever, I guess, is what I'm sort of interested in, and how it's going to impact the financials, because I would hate to see us not plan for any of this, not have any funding in there at this time, and then 6 months from now decide that this was a disaster and we need to, find a huge amount of money with a real disruption in the financial plan.
Chair Olson?
Yes.
Would it be appropriate to receive an update from school district officials on their plans to reopen?
Yeah, that would be very helpful.
We do have members online.
Right. If we could have the finance director speak to some of these inquiries, that would be very helpful. Can we do that?
As a reminder to unmute *6, please.
Pardon?
And just as a reminder to those folks to hit *6.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Jeff Pritchard, the CFO for the Board of Education. So the questions that you all are asking are the same questions that we're asking. It's the same questions that every single school district in the entire country is asking. So we're working pretty much nonstop and round the clock to figure out what school is going to look like next year. And to be honest, no one knows, is school going to start in September? Are we going to be remote in September? Are we going to start school and maybe have to then go remote a month or two later? So all of these things are really in flux right now. We have some flexibility built into the budget to address additional costs that are going to come. Obviously, there's a large stimulus packet that the House passed that the Senate has not looked at that is really the main one that's going to address a lot of the funding needs for school districts. But, I wish I had all the answers. I can't speak to some of the instructional things about how we're going to get students back up, special ed students back up to grade level. That's certainly something that maybe our special ed department can, but a lot of this right now is figuring out what school is even going to look like to start with. And again, this is across, across the country. So there are no, even schools, for instance, I'm on weekly meetings with fellow CFOs and operations folks from across the country, in all the large school districts, the Council of Great City School Districts, and there's schools that are opening up in a little over a month, and they still don't even know if they're going to be in person, in remote, some combination thereof. So these are things that, are constantly consuming us, night and day. So I wish I had more, that we had a plan, exactly how this is going to go. But I unfortunately, that's just not something we have right now that I can really share with the group here.
You're all certainly very underpaid for what's being asked. Has there been any evaluation of the effectiveness of the online teaching that occurred this year in terms of the number of students who participated and the level of participation?
I don't have that information. That's something I can ask about.
Sure, if you would, that'd be great.
I know just from my own perspective, I have two children that go to Buffalo Public Schools, and they were working on assignments every day. Every week there were several online sessions. My older daughter had, she got her computer from school. My younger one uses stuff that we have at home, but they were on calls with their teachers, not just their homeroom teachers, but their other special area teachers. When I saw those, I could see there were a lot of other little kids online. So, I know that's, I don't know that we're the norm, but it seems like from folks that I've talked to, students were very interested in staying in touch with as much as they can, their peers, their teachers. So, I think that's in large part. Now, I know in some instances, technology is a barrier. Our IT department, I think, has worked tirelessly to try and make sure that technology was available to students. Hotspots were available for students that didn't have internet connections. So, anecdotally, I think things look good, but I can see if there's something more formal that we have. And it may be something that may take some time to gather. I just don't know. That's just not my wheelhouse, so I'm not sure what data we have on that. But
right.
I'll certainly ask.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I think the concern here is obviously the lower income students, lack of technology, lack of connectivity. So I think it would be useful to get, if the district, once things settle down a little, could take a look at the effectiveness of this, especially if it's going to have to continue into the new school year. Because at least from my experience, and it's obviously a very different experience, the level of online learning is considerably variable depending on student interest, technological capabilities, time. And sometimes you need someone looking over the shoulder to make sure they're on, and that isn't always available either. So the school's in a very difficult situation, obviously, but it would be useful to get some sense of those questions, because I suspect that some level of online instruction is likely to be the norm for a while. I can appreciate the fact that working on the budget is probably taking up all of your time. So you don't have evaluations.
Yeah, but and there's obviously folks that know a lot more on these areas that can speak to them. But the social and emotional, cost and impact on students is significant. I mean, and again, anecdotally, I could tell because I know my kids miss seeing their friends and their teacher. It's not exactly a fun situation. So, there's both student learning, but then the social and emotional well-being of the students as well is something, and that may be even more difficult to calculate or to measure, but certainly maybe more more of a prominent issue going forward, especially with some of the little kids. So,
what does the budget look like with respect to non-instructional social workers, psychologists, and others who will probably be needed more than ever once this starts out?
So most of those positions, and again, as Nathan had mentioned, most of the budget, because it's the only information we had, was really how education looked before. For the most part, most schools that made decisions on what type of positions to include kept things somewhat static. So in terms of psychologists, social workers, guidance, things like that, those for the most part were relatively flat. It might have gone, a couple might have gone up, a couple down from the prior year. But that's an area, especially as we start to figure out where we are, that there is the ability for the superintendent to kind of allocate resources to some of those areas as needed, as we really can define the issues and can define where where we need to put more of these supports.
Do you have a line in the budget or something that will allow you to have the flexibility for either the social workers, or, as we were just talking about, the need for maybe additional teachers to bring people up to speed? I mean, if we're going to talk about this as being a priority, then you would hope that there would be at least a line in the budget where you could move money to, and you may not know how much it's going to be, but that if we believe that this is an important area, that it should at least be represented in the budget so that you do have the flexibility And I guess I'm a little concerned when we talk about the sociologists and nurses and others that might be needed, that it was done on a school-by-school basis as opposed to, and maybe I just misunderstand. So was this done, and maybe I should ask it this way, was it done on a district-wide level to see what need was and how we were going to address that, or was it done school by school where they just brought the budgets and brought them up?
It's a little bit of both. So on the second question, there are departments that are in charge overall of sort of the student support. Schools themselves, though, have the ability within their school-based budget allocation to add more of some of these positions than would sort of just be assigned by the department itself. So it's kind of both. But and ultimately, we do allow the schools to make decisions with their funding based on based on the best available information they have. Their school-based management teams, which is it's staff, principal, parents, and so forth that make some of these decisions. Other things, though, the departments themselves, when they see a need, will advocate and will push for things. And again, ultimately, a lot of it comes down to the superintendent. Where a need is identified, I think he's in the best position of anyone to decide where to allocate sort of scarce resources. To your first question, there is a contingency in the budget, and unfortunately, I'm at home and I don't have it right in front of me what that number is. But we include a contingency in the budget, and we've also not allocated all of the staff positions that we have in the budget. So there are some positions that are essentially unallocated at this point that could be converted into, if needed, for additional special ed teachers, or depending on if we have to reduce class size in the lower grades, could be allocated towards that. So there is within the budget that was adopted flexibility to do that, and ultimately, we've, as a district, I think we've done a good job of building up fund balance reserves over the last several years when times were good. If we have to, we may have to come back to our board and say, we're going to need to invest more money here to restart schools. So that's also an option. That's not in the budget, but that is something that the district could do if needed. And again, we'll find out because things change very quickly with what we're hearing our peer districts are doing and what guidance that we're getting from the state. So, and also just based on what's happening in the world with coronavirus. So, certainly a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, no, I just guess given how poor our students are, that we might very well need to be at the forefront of all of this, and I would just hope that we would have a group that would be starting to work on this process and some of the things we've just talked about, which I understand the contingencies. I guess the only question is how important we see these things, as they're represented in the budget. But that's just a comment.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
My final question is, could you summarize what the contractual situation is with your various bargaining units in terms of the presence or lack of presence of viable agreements?
I would, without, with the exception of what you can kind of see out in the public world, I guess I don't know that I'm really the best person to give an update on them. I mean, I know our teachers' contract is out.
What contracts are going to have to be negotiated?
Right. So
having contracts in force.
Yeah, of the largest, you've got your teachers. Administrators' contract expires in August, and our aides and assistants is a contract that had been expired for several years, and is one that does need to be settled. Most of our food service, I believe all the food service ones are current. I believe bus aides, I think subs, our white collar, the engineers are still outstanding. But a lot of the instructional, the core instructional groups will come September 1st. They will, if nothing new is settled, they will all be outstanding at that point.
Okay, yeah, you've done, I think, a very good job of cleaning up that situation from where it certainly was with respect to contracts being out of time for close to decades. But obviously it's going to be a challenge along with everything else that you've got to do to address the issue of the budget margin as well. Any other questions for Jeff or for Nathan? Well, we're here to help, certainly, and the district has done a very good job of creating fund balance, and certainly that places you in a fairly advantageous situation given the uncertainties that necessarily are present.
Chairman Niels, this is Director Jeanette, and
yes,
I think I have, it's probably most appropriate right now. Nathan may be able to speak to it, Jeffrey may be able to speak to it. Well, in our work, we scrutinize proposed recommended budgets for the city and for the district, and now we're scrutinizing approved budgets by the city and the district. And it's perfectly clear none of us have ever traveled this road before. And I don't just mean the people here in Buffalo. No one has traveled this road before. So here's the observation and the question. We know from the mayor himself that he did not want to propose amendments to his budget, but which was approved, but that he knows that there will be a modified budget. There will be modifications to the approved budget. And we just heard from Mr. Pritchard, and we know this, that when Albany sorts out its own triage out to districts, well, there will be a modified budget. And that will go to the districts will go to the Board of Education, and the cities will go to council. Here's the question. It appears that by mid-August, the city and the district both should know for sure how much less revenue they're going to have, which will force a modified budget. And of course, that's going to include all of the startup costs for the big learning machine, all of which are just vague right now. So is there, although it's a road we've never traveled, once the city and the district here from Albany deal with 15, 18, 22% less revenue, are they required, the city and the district, by law, once they know about state-level reductions, do they have 30 days to submit a modified budget? Or can they wait until the end of the first quarter? The nightmare would be, well, I won't go into the nightmare. Is there a requirement? Is there a requirement that once the city and the district hear from Albany, this is your apportionment for 2021, modified budgets will have to be prepared and approved? Is there a calendar deadline on that? No more than 30 days. Do they have to submit a modified budget? You see where I'm going. The city and the district, of course, are trying to do their best job in the midst of a terrible fog. And once there's a little clearing, and they have detailed revenue, realistic, hard revenue numbers, how long do they have to modify the budget? 30 days, 60 days, or can they wait until January 1st? That's my comment and question.
Perhaps we could refer that to Jim McGavern. He may be, as usual, the fount of information on this.
Okay. There is not a specified time. However, the BFSA can set a time by which the covered organization can comply, and but there's some fairly loose language when it appears revenues will not be sufficient. Well, when does that appear? There's a fair amount of discretion on both sides that is built in. But the one thing that is clear, I think, is that if the BFSA does make a determination that a budget modification is required, that it can set a timetable for a response.
So, Jim, in our advisory status, we could, not our control status, we could set, let's say, a 45-day deadline after we know that City Hall has its realistic and hard budget numbers, and after the district has their hard numbers. We could set a modification budget submission deadline?
Well, yes, the answer is yes, and it's of all of the things that are mandatory during a control period, but merely advisory during an advisory period. The one thing that is still mandatory in an advisory period is the timetable for adoption and modification of the budget and 4-year plan, and then modifications thereof. It would be up to the BFSA board and staff to keep an eye on things, and at some point when it appears that the picture is getting clearer, I mean, like, okay, now you really know you're never going to see the $65 million in the House bill for the city. And I don't know how much from the school districts that are involved. I'm not familiar with those numbers. I'm sure Mr. Pritchard knows that much better than I do. But when it becomes apparent that it's, at one time it was said, well, if it's not done by Memorial Day, it won't be done. However, the chairman of the Federal Reserve has been saying, you've got to do this, basically publicly saying to the administration and the Congress. And so that may, I'm hopeful that advice will be taken. But the Senate's going in recess in August, and so I don't know when this is going to, when the appropriate time is going to be. It's very hard to determine. And in the meanwhile, the impact of the COVID virus and the shutdown and the continuing effects of that shutdown on the economy, and how slow it is, fast or slow it is for the economy to be coming to regain its its pre-pandemic condition is also uncertain now. I think the best thing we can say is that it'll be up to the both both the city, the school district, the other code organizations, and for BFSA to keep their eye on all this and keep the matter under continuing discussion, even amongst them. As Councilman Rashid Wyatt was suggesting earlier, and very people weighed in on that, to have a continuing deliberative consultative process going on. I think as things unfold, and so that the BFSA and the city controller's office, the council, the mayor's office, administration are constantly deliberating on this and being alert to that a budget modification may be required. And remember that part of our plan is to request action by the state legislature to authorize the FSA to issue bonds to fund the city's operating deficits in the next couple of years, say 3-4 years, as it did at the inception of the FSA. So, and when is the legislature going to act on that? Or when do we get a definitive yes or no? So all that is, I think, in the mix of factors that have to be considered. But to get the most direct answer I can say is the BFSA can at any time step in and require, I mean, if the conditions are met, but they're going to be met every day.
Yes?
Because it's very clear.
No, that's it, almost.
The city's
This is the last item.
out of balance, or at least in the city's case,
This hot
it's out of balance and will continue to be so for the foreseeable future. That's kind of long-winded. I hope it answers your question, though.
Well, Chairman Niels, Jim's counsel was heightened vigilance of the fact that modifications will be necessary.
Yeah.
And that we can, that we have the authority to propose required modifications be filed as soon as reasonably appropriate. Do you think we need a mechanism, or is it just our competent executive director monitors information coming in from Albany to the district and the city, or?
Well, Jeanette, I think the executive director is in fairly close contact with the budget director of the city. I know Nathan is very well informed about the status of the budget of the district. So I would assume that as things develop, as they certainly will, we're in a position to work hopefully collaboratively and closely with both with all the covered organizations to come up with a mutually agreeable approach to the deficits that are going to almost certainly be there, and that we would be working closely with them to try to come up with reasonable dates and that reflect the reality of their situation, so that they can reach some closure on this at some point. Because obviously it's critical that they do. Because you have the quality of education of the children in the city of Buffalo and all the essential services that the city itself provides that are going to have to be maintained somehow during this period of extreme dislocation. Which I suspect no matter no matter what the Congress and administration ultimately do, that there will still be significant budgetary issues for across the board.
Yes, indeed.
For the district and the city. And that
yes, indeed.
It's just a matter of getting a clarity on how much the disaster can be averted through federal assistance, which, given their performance to date, is not likely to occur soon, or to reoccur soon. Is that
well, then
your
our
question,
posture is, yes, it is. Yes, it does. The posture is heightened vigilance. In an ordinary fiscal year, we watch the first and second quarter of our entities unfold, and we haven't even begun the first quarter, and we're in ultra concern for each entity. So Jim's choice of words was heightened vigilance, and Jeanette and her team have the necessary context. So we're okay. We're okay.
And I think your question and Jim's remarks and the discussion of the budget highlight the fact that now more than ever there needs to be close collaboration and communication between the various entities that are involved in the fiscal picture of the city and the district in particular. So I think the demands on everybody, including our staff, are certainly heightened, and much more collaboration and close monitoring is going to be required.
Okay.
Any other questions?
This is Donna. I know I talked to Jeanette and Bryce fairly. We try to talk fairly recently, so we do bring each other up to date on anything that impacts the city. So I think we are in pretty good communication on a regular basis from the city side.
That's certainly my experience. I think the city has been, particularly you, have been very forthcoming on keeping us up to date on what the situation is, and also we have, I think, established a very close and effective working relationship that will certainly continue and needs to continue during this time.
Well, as does Jeanette have a good relationship with Mr. Pritchard, and it is perfectly clear we have effective, respectful, functioning relations with all of the budget makers and budget deciders. I know that. Luckily, we have that. My concern was, as I said, what event, what knowledge will require the preparation of a modified budget, and we'll just watch and see.
Yeah, I'm sure there are going to be issues about since all of these budgets are somewhat make certain financial assumptions with respect to the availability of income for the various bodies, that as that develops and budgets become out of balance, clearly it's going to be necessary for all of us to work together collaboratively to address that problem.
Chair Olson?
Yes.
This is Jeanette Robe. I just thought I'd add to the dialogue that, and I agree with everything that I'm listening to. I think Donna and I speak regularly and update each other on events, and we hold very, very good, thoughtful conversations. A triggering event, so to speak, that we have built into our existing BFSA Act is the required quarterly reporting as well.
Right.
That requires within 30 days after every quarter a budget report. So presumably, if there, things that were not shaken out in between the reporting periods that would be captured in the quarterly reporting. In fact, I believe we've kind of used that quarterly reporting to trigger a financial plan modification requirement in the past. And it's worked pretty effectively. I know we're working with totally different circumstances than we've ever worked with before, and we'll certainly monitor that as we move forward. I'm not suggesting that the quarterly reporting is the right timing. I'm just bringing it up as another set of timing that's available to the board.
Right, and also,
Thank you.
Given our close engagement with the city and our continuing monitor of the district, if these things occur at an off time, we certainly will be informed about them and be able to react as necessary as we have so far with respect to special meetings and close collaboration. So I have every expectation that although the demands on everybody involved are much higher, the system is as structured, is flexible enough to deal even with this level of uncertainty. Any other questions? Okay, we'll now move on to BFSA items. Our first item is to consider a resolution requiring the submission of a final budget and financial plan by the mayor to the BFSA. The draft resolution was provided to you by email earlier today. The resolution indicates that a final submission is required to be submitted that reflects Common Council's final changes to the 2020-21 budget based on Council's actions taken on June 4th, to reflect the financial impact of the anticipated deficit note financing and any other modifications pursuant to our prior resolution number 20-05 over our review of the budget and financial plan. It requires the submission to occur no later than June 30th, 2020. May I have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Chair Olson, this is Don Estrich. I will be abstaining from this vote.
Okay. Don,
Sure.
Does that timing work for you?
Yes, the timing works for us, but per the mayor, he still feels comfortable with the budget as presented.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and certainly respect his opinion on it.
Yes, June 30th.
Yeah. Hopefully the picture will be at least a little clearer, although I doubt it. Okay, hearing no further discussion, we'll vote. Why don't we do it on a roll call, George? I guess I can do it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
You asked for a roll call?
Yes, and I'm voting yes.
Okay. Vice Chairman Jurczak?
Yes.
Council President, Secretary Arthur votes yes. Director Floss?
Yes.
County Executive Poloncarz?
Yes.
Yes. And Mayor Brown?
Abstain.
Mr. Chairman, the motion is approved.
Okay, thank you, George. Next BFSA item is to affirm the recommendation of the Audit, Finance, and Budget Committee, which was made today, to approve the BFSA's 2020-21 budget and the 21-24 financial plan. The final budget and financial plan are included under tab 1 of the board book. The accompanying draft resolution is included under tab 5. May I have a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? I would note that the budget, despite the unusual occurrences, the budget reflects an overall cut in expenditures, which may be even greater because there is a litigation line, which hopefully we can avoid. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, George.
Jim McGavin. Is Jim on the line? Jim, you and I had a discussion. And
can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay.
I'm inquiring about our discussion. You were going to have something for submission today. Were you were able to get that together, or you want to, or what?
Well, I was prepared if we didn't have 5 votes. I was prepared to suggest that we proceed despite the lack of 5 votes which are required by the BFSA Act to take any action. But if we only have 4 votes, the deliberations today are still a matter of record, and they're still useful as showing what the issues are and the containing ideas, at least, for coping as best we all can with a really extraordinary situation. And that if we eventually we got to issue a report to the state. There is no deadline for that. That is to the
no. What I'm getting at, Jim, is that no, I'm talking about the amendment to the bylaws.
Well, I don't.
No, we approved the item today, but you were going to have an item that was going to be filed for us to be able to discuss and to deliberate over. You know, I know what you're saying about.
Okay, George, I didn't really understand that, but
okay.
I think we can't. There's no way we can reduce.
Jim, I don't agree with you. Let you and I talk again, because I think the statutes do permit us to amend the bylaws and amend the statute.
Well, yeah, but there's an exception clause in the statute. Okay.
The exception clause is what you're talking about in the bylaws. The bylaws.
No,
I haven't seen the exception. Well, if there's an exception clause that says you can't do it in the statute, I would appreciate if you would send me a copy of that. I have not read that.
I sent it to you, George.
Not on it. Well, we won't hold this up. I'll call you and we'll talk about it.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Okay.
Just to clarify for those outside the boundaries of the conversation, what we're trying to address here and talk about is the fact that since I've been a member of this authority, I think George has as well, there have been very few, if any, appointments to replace members who have left the authority. And that has left us in a dangerous position where we might not be able to take action, which obviously now is more important than ever, as we've been discussing. So George has, I think, quite appropriately suggested that we consult with Jim to try to figure out what, if anything, we can do to address the problem of the lack of appointments. Obviously now, with everything else that's on the governor's plate, it's unlikely that appointments to the BFSA are the top item. So I'm not anticipating any change in the situation. No. So the hope is that between conversations with George and Jim, we can reach some agreement on what our options are, if any, to address this problem, because I think George has put his finger on on a rather serious issue for us, because this is quite apparent. We have to work to reach a quorum even,
Right.
much less a actionable vote. So that's what we're talking about.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I would move to adjourn.
Well, we have to. I think we have to vote on. Did we vote on? We did. Okay. So I guess we concluded our business. Is that right, Jeanette?
Yes.
I don't have us recorded as voting on the budget yet.
Okay, I wasn't sure about that. That's why I asked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's do that. We certainly want to have a budget for the authority, particularly given the extraordinary extra amount of work they're doing. Since there's no further discussion on that, let's take a vote. All in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion passes. We've discussed at least one item of new business, which is actually fairly crucial, which is our ability to deliberate and make decisions. Is there any other new business that we should discuss at this point? Okay, then this concludes the business section of our meeting. I don't know how this is going to work on the phone, but I would like to provide an opportunity for anybody in the audience to address the board. If you wish to, please press *6 to speak and begin by identifying yourself. Do we have an audience? Okay, hearing none.
Move
this
adjourn.
concludes our business. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, by acclamation then. Thank you, everybody. This actually went fairly smoothly. And I continue to want to express gratitude to Jeanette and our very competent staff for all of the extraordinary work they've been putting in on this under less than ideal positions, working from home for the basis. The amount of preparation work that's been required over the past month has really been quite extraordinary. So I wanted to express my appreciation. And
thank you. On behalf of my staff, thank you too.
With that, I guess we're adjourned. So thank you, everybody.